Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is tonight fighting for his political life. He's been pushing through laws to give elected governments like his the power to select judges. Critics say it's an attack on democracy that threatens vital checks on the Prime Minister's power. Well, tonight, Netanyahu sensationally suspended those plans for a month. He spoke of a dangerous clash that is endangering Israel's basic unity, and he said he was now prepared to suspend pushing this legislation through Parliament. It's not clear exactly what the new time frame will be. It may just be a few weeks, in which case it may not be the end of these protests. But it's some kind of breakthrough. There have been massive protests from right across the political divide. Tens of thousands took to the streets in anger on Sunday after Netanyahu fired his defence minister, who had called for this kind of pause. Police and soldiers used water cannons on demonstrators gathered outside Netanyahu's home. Today, Israel's biggest airport suspended flights as workers went on strike. Ports, shops, banks, even hospitals are now disrupted. Well, in a moment, my world-exclusive interview with Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's the only one, like I say, he's given throughout this turmoil. But first, in the last few hours, the embattled premier has gone on national television in Israel and addressed the people of Israel after 48 hours of total chaos. He was criticised for not speaking to the country all day, but eventually he did. And here's some of what he said.
I am aware of the increased tension that is happening between the two parts of the country. I am listening to the wants of many citizens to release this tension. But there is one thing that I am not willing to accept. There is one minority that is willing to tear this country into pieces.
Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu was in London over the weekend. He held talks at Downing Street with our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, before flying back to a country in chaos late Saturday night. Well, just before he got on that plane, I got a call to go and sit down with Benjamin Netanyahu for what turned out to be the only interview he's given during this crisis, a genuine world exclusive. Prime Minister, you've been elected 6 times. You're the longest serving Prime Minister in Israel's history, 15 years. Israel is 75 in a few weeks' time, and it ought to be a time of celebration both for you, for this extraordinary personal achievement, and for your country. But instead, Israel is in turmoil at the moment, facing what some fear could turn out to be civil war, fears of a potential third intifada. Is this your biggest challenge right now?
It's a very big challenge, but I think that the prospects for Israel are great. I think there is a lot of concern about the democratic judicial reform that we want to move ahead with, but people think that it's going to result in a fissure that I don't think will last, because people will see at the end that Israel was a democracy, is a democracy, and will be even a stronger democracy after this democratic reform. So I think you're right. There's a lot of tension right now, and I wish it wasn't so. But I'm quite confident that we'll get over this difficulty, because, you know, you have to reform things that get ossified. And in Israel, what we've had is the ossification of the imbalance between the 3 branches of government that has to be corrected. This happened in the last 20 years. It's been building up, building up, building up, and people say, we want to correct that. And, you know, people who are used to one thing don't want to correct it so quickly.
Well, that's because the critics say it's not reform, it's regime change, effectively, is what you're trying to push through. They say that what this bill will do, it'll arm you, the Prime Minister, with the power to appoint judges that you want, and for your government to overturn any judgment of the Supreme Court that you don't like, as long as there's even a 1-vote majority in the Knesset. In other words, the judiciary, they say, will be neutered, and with that, the rule of law, and with that, democracy itself.
Yeah, well, let's take that apart one by one. The first thing that has to be understood is, what is a democracy? Democracy is majority rule with the protection of individual rights. And to get these 2 things, what you have is the checks and balances between the 3 branches of government, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. Everybody understands that. In Israel, over the last 20 years, that balance has been taken off the rails, because the judiciary became not independent. It's always been independent, will always be independent. It became all-powerful. So it can nullify any decision of the parliament, the Knesset, And it can be a legal decision, a legal law, that's fine. But they say it's not reasonable. Doesn't exist anywhere in the democracies, such powers. It can nullify any decision of the government, and often has. It can nullify any appointment of the government. It can intervene in military matters. It can intervene in our battle against terrorists. It can intervene in taking gas out of the sea that costs us billions of dollars. Billions of dollars. I finally got it out. All these things are unacceptable.
But it's called, well, hang on, it's called checks and balances.
Well, there is no checks and balances.
Yes, but actually, it's the only check and balance in Israel to the government.
No,
right?
no, it's not. In all democracies, there's one other thing, and I'll answer your question one by one. It's important. There's one other thing that characterizes this, the judiciary in Israel, and that is that the judges veto the appointment of judges. They effectively select themselves. In other words, and that doesn't exist in any democracy. The reform that we're dealing with right now corrects that. It allows for a balanced.
Well, it means that you can pick them.
No, I can't pick them. In fact, it's an even thing between the majority and the minority, the coalition and the opposition. It's in fact not that one side can pick them, but by the way, in most democracies, with the exception of Britain, by the way, they all judges are chosen by elected officials. And in Israel, the discussion is so narrow and so one-sided that they say, how could it be that judges will be chosen by elected officials? And I say, hello? This is what is being done in every democracy.
But why is someone like you, who's always been such a staunch defender of an independent judiciary in Israel, why take a move that even some of your close colleagues and supporters say is a step too far in infringing on that independence?
I absolutely will always defend the independence of the judiciary. And the way that's achieved in all the democracies in which judges are appointed by elected officials. In America, for example, who picks the judges? The politicians, the president. The politicians then have to affirm. By the way, that's replicated more or less in most of the democracies in one way or the other. Well, how are the judges independent? They're independent because once they're there either until retirement or until life. And that's what happened in the United States just now. I mean, the former president chose some very strong conservative judges, and the first opportunity they voted against them because they're independent. So the independence of the judiciary will always be maintained. I think that the important thing to understand...
But that's not how people are seeing this.
Because they don't know the facts.
Well, they studied the bill and they say
that
they're presenting it as an autocratic move.
No, they're framing it as such, but they haven't really studied the
But is what you're doing really consistent with what you said in 2012 in the speech? Let me remind you your exact words then. Mm-hmm. I believe that a strong independent court allows for the existence of all other institutions in a democracy. I ask that you show me one dictatorship, one undemocratic society where a strong independent court system exists. There's no such thing. In places with no strong and independent court system, rights cannot be protected. In fact, the difference between countries in which rights are only on paper and those in which there are actual rights, that difference is a strong independent court. This is the reason that I am doing and will continue to do everything I can to protect the court system and make it strong and independent. I will continue to operate this way. Every time a bill comes across my desk that could harm the independence of Israeli courts, we'll take it off the table. That's you, 2012. And now here you are, 11 years later, you're the one putting the bill on the table, which many people on all sides of the divide in Israel say is achieving the exact thing you were so keen to avoid.
And I stand by everything that I said. An independent court, a judiciary that is independent is something that was in Israel and will remain in Israel. But here's the thing. In the last 10 years, the judiciary went from being an independent judiciary to an all-powerful judiciary. The balance of the three branches of government says that you have to have three branches that are balanced. In Israel, you have like one big trunk, the judiciary, that's what's developed, with two little twigs on the side. That's not democracy. Democracy means that every branch of government balances the other. And that's, in Israel, it's the most judicially activist court on the planet.